I spent 7 years cleaning the same mansion, invisible, disposable, just another housekeeper they barely noticed. Until the day the family CEO called me Mom at the altar of his wedding, in front of 300 guests, and everything changed. His biological mother went pale, the ballroom fell silent, and me. I finally understood why he always came back to that kitchen when he was just a lost young man looking for someone who saw him. It was a Tuesday when I first walked through those tall iron gates, the kind that make you feel small before you even reach the house. My hands were shaking as I pressed the intercom button. The voice that answered was clipped, efficient, cold. Service entrance is around back. Of course it was. That should have been my first clue about what kind of place this was. But I needed the job. At 52, with 3 grown children back home who still needed help, with bills that never stopped coming, with a body that was starting to ache in places I didn't know could ache, I needed this job. So I walked around back, past the manicured hedges and the fountain that probably cost more than my entire year's salary, and I knocked on the service door. The woman who opened it looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Cream-colored suit, hair pulled back so tight it must have hurt, pearls at her neck that caught the morning light. Mrs. Morrison. She didn't smile, didn't offer her hand, just looked me up and down like she was inspecting produce at the grocery store. "You're the new girl," she said. Not a question. I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I don't need your life story," she interrupted. "Can you clean?" "Yes, ma'am." "Can you cook?" "Yes, ma'am." "Can you be invisible?" That one made me pause. She noticed and gave me a thin smile. "The best help is the kind you never notice. Can you do that?" I thought about my rent, about the money I sent home every month, about my daughter's medical bills. "Yes, ma'am, I can be invisible." She hired me on the spot, showed me around the mansion in 15 minutes flat, rattling off instructions like a drill sergeant. The house was enormous, 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a kitchen bigger than my entire apartment, a library I'd never seen anyone use, a gym that looked untouched, and a living room so white and pristine it didn't look like anyone actually lived there. Because, I'd learned, they didn't. Not really. They existed there, they slept there, they hosted parties there. But lived? No. "You'll start at 6 every morning," Mrs. Morrison said as we walked back to the kitchen. "Mr. Morrison leaves for work at 7, I leave at 9. You'll have the house to yourself most days. Clean, cook dinner for 7 p.m., do laundry on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and leave by 6:30. Questions?" "And your son?" I asked carefully. "What about him?" "Will he need anything? Meals, laundry?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Daniel is 22. He can take care of himself. He doesn't live here full-time anyway. He's starting some little tech thing downtown. You'll barely see him." She was wrong about that. My first week was exactly what she'd promised. I arrived at 6 when the house was still dark and cold, made coffee that Mr. Morrison grabbed on his way out without a word, cleaned rooms that never seemed to get dirty because no one ever seemed to use them, cooked elaborate dinners that Mrs. Morrison picked at while scrolling through her phone, sitting alone at a dining table built for 12. I was a ghost in that house, a shadow that dusted and vacuumed and cooked and disappeared. I didn't mind. Being invisible was easier than being seen sometimes. Being invisible meant no one asked questions about why I was here, why I'd left my children, why I worked 16-hour days, including a night shift at a hotel just to make ends meet. Being invisible meant I could cry while I scrubbed their marble floors, and no one would notice. It was my second Tuesday when everything changed. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Something simple. Roasted chicken, vegetables, rice, the kind of meal I used to make for my own children when they were small and we had so little. I heard footsteps on the stairs, slow and heavy, not the sharp click of Mrs. Morrison's heels or the purposeful stride of Mr. Morrison's dress shoes. I turned and saw him for the first time. Daniel Morrison. Tall, maybe 6 feet, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and the kind of face that would have been handsome if it didn't look so tired. He was wearing sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, and he froze when he saw me in the kitchen, like he'd been caught trespassing in his own home. "Sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't know anyone was here." "I'm the new housekeeper," I said. "You must be Daniel." He nodded, still hovering in the doorway like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to enter. I smelled something cooking, real food, not restaurant takeout. He laughed, but it was a sad sound. "I've been living on cold pizza and energy drinks for 3 days. I looked at this young man, this boy really, standing in his own home like a stranger, and something in my chest cracked open. "Are you hungry?" I asked. His eyes lit up, just for a second, just enough. Yes, if it's not too much trouble." I made him a plate. Not the fancy plated presentation his mother would expect, but the kind of food that means something, a heap of rice, chicken with the skin still crispy, vegetables that actually had flavor, and 2 warm tortillas I'd made that morning because I couldn't help myself. He sat at the kitchen counter, not the dining room, and he ate slowly, deliberately, like he was trying to memorize the taste. "This is really good," he said after a while. "Thank you." "De nada," I said automatically, then caught myself. "You're welcome." He smiled at my accent, not mocking, just noticing. "Where are you from?" "Guatemala, a small town. You wouldn't know it." "Try me." And so I told him about the mountains, about my grandmother's house with the tin roof that rang like music when it rained, about my children. I don't know why I told him. Maybe because he asked, maybe because no one had asked me anything about myself in so long. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That sounds beautiful. Do you miss it?" "Every single day," I thought, but what I said was, "Sometimes." He nodded like he understood something I hadn't said out loud. After that, he started coming to the kitchen every day. At first, it was just for food. He'd come down around 4 or 5, always apologizing, always asking if it was okay. I started making extra portions. Started keeping his favorite things stocked, the bread he liked, the specific brand of coffee, fresh fruit. Mrs. Morrison never noticed. She was too busy with her charity galas and country club committees and whatever else wealthy people do to feel important. Mr. Morrison was a ghost himself, leaving before dawn, returning after dark, barely acknowledging that his son existed. But Daniel noticed. He noticed when I was limping because my knee was bothering me. He noticed when I was quieter than usual because I'd gotten bad news from home. He noticed me. And slowly, carefully, the conversations got longer, deeper. He told me about his startup, how he was trying to build something meaningful, something that mattered. How his father wanted him to join the family investment firm, wear a suit, play golf, make money off other people's money. How he'd rather die than live that life. "They don't see me," he said one evening, sitting on a kitchen stool while I chopped onions for dinner. They look at me and they see, I don't know, a chess piece, something to position, something that reflects on them. I kept chopping, kept my eyes on the cutting board. "I see you," I said quietly. When I looked up, his eyes were wet. That became our routine. 5 days a week, sometimes 6, Daniel would come to the kitchen. Sometimes he worked on his laptop at the counter while I cooked. Sometimes he helped badly, making me laugh when he couldn't figure out how to peel garlic. Sometimes we didn't talk at all, just existed in the same space, and that was enough. I knew I was crossing lines. I knew Mrs. Morrison wouldn't approve of the help getting too familiar with the family. But this wasn't about familiarity. This was about a young man who needed someone to see him as human, and an older woman who needed to remember why she worked so hard. My own children were grown now. My oldest, Maria, was married with 2 babies I'd only seen in photos. My middle son, Carlos, was working in construction and barely called. My youngest, Sophia, was the only one who still needed me, who still called every week, but even she had her own life now. I'd sacrificed so much to give them better lives, and I didn't regret it. But sometimes in the quiet moments, I felt the weight of those years, the distance, the missed birthdays and graduations and everyday moments. Daniel filled something I didn't even know was empty. The first year passed like water. Seasons changed outside those massive windows. Fall turned to winter, winter to spring. Daniel's startup started gaining traction. He'd come into the kitchen wired with excitement, talking so fast I could barely keep up, explaining algorithms and user interfaces and funding rounds. I didn't understand most of it, but I understood the light in his eyes. I understood what it meant to build something from nothing. By the second year, he'd moved out of his parents' house completely, got a small apartment downtown, closer to his office. But he still came back, 3, 4 times a week. His mother asked him once, when he happened to arrive while she was still home, why he kept visiting. "The food," he said simply. She looked at me with something like suspicion. "It's just cooking," she said. "You could hire someone to cook for you." "It's not the same," he said, and it wasn't, because it was never about the food. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever wondered if the work you do matters when no one seems to notice, leave the word "seen" in the comments. I see you, and your work matters more than you know. If you're new here, subscribe, because the best part of this story is still coming, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The third year was harder. Daniel's company exploded. He was on the cover of business magazines. Tech blogs called him the next big thing. Investors threw money at him, and suddenly he was traveling constantly. San Francisco, New York, London, Singapore. I'd see him maybe once a month, if that. The kitchen felt emptier without him. I'd still cook, still clean, still be invisible to everyone else in that house. But the one person who'd made me feel seen was gone. I was happy for him. Proud, even. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. There were nights when I'd set an extra place at the counter out of habit, then have to put it away when I remembered he wouldn't be coming. Nights when I'd make his favorite meal and end up eating it alone, the silence so thick I could barely swallow. I told myself this was natural. This was what was supposed to happen. Children grow up. They leave. They build their own lives. I'd done the same thing with my own children, hadn't I? Left them to build a better future. This was just the other side of that same coin. But knowledge doesn't make loneliness hurt less. My own body was hurting more too. I was 55 now, my back constantly aching, my hands stiff in the mornings. I'd wake up at 4:30 for my hotel shift, my joints protesting every movement. Some mornings I'd stand in the shower letting hot water run over my shoulders for 20 minutes, just trying to loosen up enough to function. The hotel night shifts were getting harder to manage. I was slower than I used to be, made mistakes I never would have made before, forgot which rooms I'd cleaned. Had to write everything down because my memory was getting foggy from exhaustion. One of my supervisors pulled me aside and asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was fine, but I wasn't fine. I was 55 years old, working myself to dust, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep going. But I couldn't stop, couldn't slow down. Sophia needed help with her tuition. She was studying nursing, following in my footsteps in a way, wanting to help people. Every month, she'd call and apologize for needing money. Every month, I'd send it and tell her not to apologize, that this was what mothers did. Maria's husband had lost his job. She had 2 babies under 3 and no income. She didn't ask directly, but I could hear it in her voice when we talked, that edge of desperation. So I sent what I could. Carlos never asked for anything, but I knew he struggled. His construction work was seasonal, unpredictable. I'd slip money to Maria and ask her to pass it along without telling him it was from me. He had too much pride to accept help, my son. Got that from his father. So I kept working, kept sending money home, kept being invisible. The Morrison mansion felt colder than ever during that time. Mrs. Morrison had gotten worse, more demanding, more critical. The towels weren't folded correctly. The dinner wasn't seasoned enough. I'd missed a spot on the living room floor. Nothing I did was good enough, and I realized with a kind of dull clarity that it never would be. I wasn't failing at my job. She just needed someone to diminish, and I was convenient. Some days I thought about quitting, finding something easier, less demanding, but jobs for 55-year-old immigrant women with limited English and no formal education weren't exactly plentiful. I was lucky to have this. That's what I told myself. Lucky. Even though luck wasn't supposed to hurt this much. Then, one evening in late October, I heard the kitchen door open. I turned, expecting Mrs. Morrison with some new complaint about how I'd folded the towels wrong or arranged the flowers incorrectly. Instead, it was Daniel. He looked different, older somehow, even though only 3 years had passed. More tired, more worn down, but when he saw me, his whole face changed. "Hey," he said. I couldn't help it. I started crying, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears that I couldn't stop. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and hugged me, and I realized it was the first time anyone had touched me with kindness in months. "I'm sorry," he said into my hair. "I'm so sorry I haven't been around. I got caught up in everything and I—" "Don't apologize," I said, pulling back and wiping my face. "You're building your life. That's what you're supposed to do." "You're part of my life," he said firmly. "The most important part." That's when he told me his plan. He was buying his own house, a real one, not an apartment, and he wanted to hire me, not as invisible help, as someone important, someone valued. "I can't pay what my mother pays," he said. "Not yet, but I can pay you fairly, and you'd only work for me. No more night shifts, no more 16-hour days, just be there, cook sometimes, help me remember what a real home feels like." I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to say yes, but I couldn't. Because Mrs. Morrison would never allow it. She'd see it as betrayal. She'd make my life hell. "I already told her," Daniel said, reading my face. "She wasn't happy. but I'm not asking her permission. So I made the choice that would change everything. I quit the Morrison mansion. Mrs. Morrison barely said goodbye. Mr. Morrison didn't even notice I was gone. But Daniel picked me up in his car that last day, helped me carry my few belongings, and drove me to his new house. It was smaller than the mansion, of course, but it was warm, lived in, real. "Your room," he said, showing me a space on the first floor with its own bathroom and a window that faced a garden. "Your space. You're not staff here, you're family." I cried again. Seemed like I was doing a lot of that lately. For the next 3 years I worked for Daniel, but it didn't feel like work. It felt like having a son again. He respected my time, paid me more than fairly, made sure I had health insurance, helped me bring Maria's children to visit one summer. He didn't treat me like an employee. He treated me like someone who mattered, and in return, I took care of him, made sure he ate real food when he was working 100-hour weeks, reminded him to sleep, listened when he was stressed or scared or overwhelmed. His company kept growing. He hired hundreds of people, made millions, got written up in Forbes and Fortune, but he never changed, not with me. He still came to the kitchen, still asked how I was, still saw me. By year 6, I was 58. My hair was completely gray now. My hands were rough and scarred from years of work. I was slowing down, though I tried not to show it. Daniel noticed, of course. He always noticed. "I think you should retire," he said one evening. I laughed. "On what?" I send most of my money home. "On the pension I'm setting up for you," he said. "It's not charity. It's payment for everything you've done, everything you are." I cried. Again, I was becoming predictable. "Not yet," I said. "I'm not ready yet." He nodded, but I could see him planning anyway. That's who he was. The person who saw what you needed before you could ask. Then came the announcement. Daniel was getting engaged. Her name was Rebecca, and she was beautiful, brilliant, kind, a human rights attorney who worked with immigrant families. When Daniel brought her to meet me, she didn't look at me like I was staff. She hugged me, asked about my family, spoke Spanish with me. I loved her immediately. "She's the one," Daniel told me later, his eyes shining. "I want to marry her." "Then do it," I said, squeezing his hand. "Be happy." The wedding planning started immediately, and just like with his parents, it became a production. Rebecca's family and Daniel's family, old money meeting, new money, society pages and photographers and guest lists that kept growing. 300 people, maybe more. The Morrison mansion was transformed into a venue. Mrs. Morrison took control with the same cold efficiency she'd used to run her household. I watched it all from a distance. I was happy for Daniel, truly. But I also knew my place. I was the former housekeeper, the help. I didn't belong at a wedding like that. Then, 4 weeks before the wedding, Daniel came to see me. He was holding an envelope. "You're invited," he said, putting it in my hands. "Daniel, I can't." "You can. You will. I don't belong. You belong more than anyone." I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The invitation was beautiful. Heavy paper, gold lettering, and my name written in Daniel's own handwriting. "I don't have anything to wear to something like this," I said weakly. "Then we'll get you something," he said. "Please, I need you there." How could I say no? The next 3 weeks were a blur. Rebecca took me shopping, wouldn't let me protest, bought me a dress that made me feel like someone I'd forgotten I could be. Not fancy, not trying to be something I wasn't, just dignified, beautiful. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The week of the wedding, I barely slept. My nerves were shot. I kept thinking I'd show up and someone would tell me there'd been a mistake, that I wasn't actually invited, that I should go around to the service entrance. The day arrived. The mansion looked like a fairy tale. Flowers everywhere, thousands of them. White roses climbing up arbors. Peonies in massive arrangements that must have cost more than I made in a month. Orchids floating in glass bowls. The air was heavy with their scent, almost overwhelming. White chairs set up in perfect rows in the garden. A tent so large it looked like it could house a small village, with chandeliers hanging from the ceiling that sparkled in the afternoon light. I arrived early, dressed in my new dress, feeling like an imposter. My hands were shaking as I walked up the driveway, past the iron gates I'd entered through for the first time 7 years ago, past the fountain, past the service entrance I'd used hundreds of times. This time I walked through the front. A young man in a black suit looked at my invitation, checked his list, and waved me through. No questions. No judgment, just entry. People were already gathering, women in designer gowns that probably cost more than my car, fabric that shimmered and flowed like water, men in expensive suits, watches that caught the light, shoes so shiny you could see your reflection. Everyone looked like they belonged in a magazine, like they'd been born knowing how to stand and smile and exist in spaces like this. I felt like a child playing dress-up, like someone would tap me on the shoulder any moment and ask what I thought I was doing here. I found a seat in the very back, hoping to disappear. Old habits. An older couple sat next to me. The woman looked at me, smiled politely the way you smile at strangers, then turned away to talk to her husband. I didn't exist to her. It was familiar, comfortable, almost. I could do this. I could be invisible here. Watch Daniel get married, share in his happiness from a distance, then slip away. That's what I'd planned. That's what I was good at. The garden filled up. Conversations buzzed around me like white noise. People greeting each other, air-kissing, laughing at jokes I couldn't hear. The sun was warm on my shoulders. I closed my eyes for a moment and tried to calm my racing heart. Tried to remember why I was here. Because Daniel wanted me here. Because after 7 years of being invisible, someone had finally insisted I be seen. The ceremony started. Music played, something classical that swelled and filled the garden. The groom's party walked down the aisle. Daniel's friends, young men in matching suits, walking with that easy confidence of people who'd never doubted they belonged anywhere. Then the groomsmen. Then Daniel's best man, someone from his company who I'd met once or twice. Then Daniel himself walking with Rebecca's father, both of them smiling. Daniel looked so handsome in his tuxedo, so grown up. I remembered that scared 22-year-old who'd shuffled into the kitchen asking for real food, and I wanted to cry right then. But I held it together. Then Rebecca, stunning in white, her dress like something from a dream, all lace and silk and tiny pearls sewn into patterns that caught the light. Her father at her side, walking slowly, savoring the moment. She was glowing, absolutely radiant. I wiped tears from my eyes with the tissue I'd brought, knowing I'd need it. This was what love looked like. This was what happiness looked like. This was everything good in the world, right here, walking down an aisle of white roses. Then Daniel, at the altar, waiting for her. When Rebecca reached him, they held hands. The officiant spoke about love and commitment and building a life together. It was beautiful, standard, exactly what you'd expect. The vows began. Rebecca went first, her voice clear and strong. Then it was Daniel's turn. He pulled out a piece of paper, started reading. His voice cracked on the third line. He stopped, looked up, and then he did something I'll never forget. He asked for a microphone. The officiant looked confused, but handed it over. Daniel turned away from Rebecca, away from the altar, and looked out at the crowd. 300 people in fancy clothes, waiting. He found me in the back. Our eyes locked. "Before I make these vows to the woman I love," he said, his voice carrying through the speakers, "I need to say something. I need to tell all of you about someone who taught me what love actually means." And my heart started pounding. No, I thought. Please don't. "When I was 22, he continued, I was lost. My parents saw me as an extension of themselves, something to manage, something to control. I didn't know what it felt like to be seen as a person until I met the woman sitting in the back row. 300 heads turned, looked at me. I wanted to disappear into the ground. "Her name is Rosa," Daniel said. My name. He'd said my name. "She came to my parents' house as a housekeeper, 52 years old, alone in a foreign country, working 2 jobs to support her children back home. And for some reason, she saw me. Really saw me. Not my last name, not my trust fund, just me." Tears were running down his face now. "She fed me when I was hungry, listened when no one else would, made me feel like I mattered when I thought I didn't. For 7 years, she's been more of a mother to me than anyone in my biological family." Mrs. Morrison stood up in the front row. Her face was bright red. Mr. Morrison pulled her back down. "She taught me that family isn't about blood," Daniel said. "It's about who shows up, who sees you, who loves you even when you can't love yourself." He set down the microphone and walked off the altar, walked down the aisle, straight toward me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what was happening. He reached my row, held out his hand. "Come here," he said softly. "No," I whispered. "I can't. Please." I took his hand. He led me to the front. Every eye in that room was on us. I'd never felt more exposed in my life. At the altar, Rebecca was crying too, but she was smiling. Daniel turned to face me, took both my hands. "You are my mother," he said, "the one who chose me, the one who loved me, and I want everyone here to know that." The silence in that room was deafening. Then someone started clapping. Rebecca's father. Then her mother. Then others, one by one. Then everyone. The whole room standing, applauding, and I couldn't stop crying. Mrs. Morrison wasn't clapping. She'd left the tent entirely, but I didn't care. Because for the first time in 7 years, I wasn't invisible. For the first time in my life, I was seen exactly as I was, essential, loved, chosen. Have you ever been chosen? Not out of obligation or duty, but because someone genuinely wanted you in their life. That's what love really is. Tell me in the comments about a time when someone chose you, and don't forget to subscribe. The ending will surprise you. The ceremony continued. Daniel made his vows to Rebecca, beautiful words about partnership and respect and choosing each other every day. She made hers. They kissed. Everyone cheered. And through it all, I sat in the front row. Not in the back, in the front, next to Daniel's empty seat, because that's where he'd placed me. The reception was in the tent. Dinner, speeches, dancing. I tried to slip away to find some corner where I could be invisible again, but Daniel wouldn't let me. "You're sitting at our table," he said, "with us." "Daniel, that's for family." "Exactly." So I sat at the head table, me, Daniel, Rebecca, her parents, her sister, not Mrs. or Mr. Morrison. They'd been moved to a different table. I heard later that they left before dinner was served. The speeches started. Rebecca's father spoke about love and joy. Her maid of honor told funny stories. Then Daniel stood up. "I've already said most of what I needed to say," he began. "But I want to add one more thing. Everything I've accomplished, everything I've built, every good thing in my life, it started in a kitchen 7 years ago when someone chose to see me as human. Rosa, I owe you everything. And this isn't the end. It's just the beginning." He'd planned it all out. Of course he had. The next week he sat me down in his house, our house. He insisted on calling it and laid out the papers, a retirement plan, a pension that would pay more than I'd ever made working, health insurance for life, and something else. A house, a small house, 2 bedrooms, a garden, in a neighborhood where other immigrant families lived, in my name. "You've spent your whole life taking care of other people," he said. "Let me take care of you now." I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "Your children," he continued. "I want to bring them here, set them up, help them build lives in this country if they want, or help you visit them whenever you want, whatever you need." "Why?" I finally managed to ask. "Why are you doing this?" He smiled. "Because you did it for me first." The next 6 months were a blur. I moved into my house, with a garden where I could grow tomatoes and peppers and herbs like my grandmother used to. Daniel helped me pick out furniture. Not expensive furniture, just comfortable things. A couch where I could actually sit and relax without worrying about getting it dirty. A kitchen table, solid wood, where I could prepare meals without rushing. A bed that didn't hurt my back. Simple things that felt like miracles. Rebecca taught me how to use a smartphone so I could video call my children. She sat with me for hours, patient as I fumbled with the buttons, showing me again and again how to start a call, how to answer, how to see their faces on the little screen. The first time I saw Maria's face on that phone, both of us crying and laughing at the same time, I thought my heart might burst. They flew Maria and her family out to visit. I stood at the airport with Daniel and Rebecca, waiting at the arrivals gate, my hands shaking. And then there she was, my daughter, her 2 babies, her husband, walking toward me. We stood in the middle of that busy airport and cried and held each other, and I didn't care who was watching. For 2 weeks they stayed. We cooked together in my kitchen. I taught my grandbabies Spanish words. We walked in the garden. We just existed together. No phone lines between us, no distance, just family. Maria kept looking around my house with wonder. "Mama," she said one evening, "you have a home, a real home." I did. For the first time in decades, I had a home. They flew Carlos out next, my strong, silent son who'd inherited his father's pride and his stubbornness. He walked into my house and looked around, and I saw his jaw tighten. "You don't have to work anymore?" he asked. "Not like before," I said. He nodded slowly. Then he hugged me, hard and long, and whispered, "I'm sorry I couldn't do this for you." "You gave me purpose," I told him. That was enough. They flew Sophia out for a whole month. My baby, my youngest. She helped me plant the garden, her hands in the dirt next to mine, talking about her nursing program, her dreams, her fears. "You did all this for us," she said one afternoon, both of us kneeling in the soil, tomato plants between us. "Worked yourself to exhaustion for us." "I'd do it again," I said, and I meant it. We all had dinner together one night, my children and Daniel and Rebecca, and baby Rosa sleeping in a carrier next to the table. My kitchen was full of voices and laughter and the smell of the meal we'd all made together. Carlos and Daniel talking about technology and business, Maria and Rebecca comparing notes about motherhood, Sofia teaching everyone a song in Spanish. Me, watching from my place at the head of the table, unable to believe this was my life now. My children kept thanking Daniel. He kept redirecting them. "Thank your mother," he'd say over and over. "She's the one who sacrificed everything. I just evened the scales a little." One evening, after everyone had left, Sofia asked me, "Mama, is he really your son?" I thought about it. About blood and DNA and the things we're told make family. "Yes," I said finally, "he really is." Mrs. Morrison tried to reach out once. 6 months after the wedding, she called my new number, which she must have gotten from someone. "Rosa," she said when I answered. Her voice was stiff, formal. "I wanted to speak with you." "Yes, Mrs. Morrison. I want you to understand that Daniel's behavior was inappropriate, making a spectacle at his wedding, embarrassing his family." "I'm sorry you felt embarrassed," I said calmly. "Is there anything else?" She sputtered. "Don't you have anything to say? Any explanation?" "For what?" "For turning my son against me." I took a deep breath. "Mrs. Morrison, I didn't turn him against you. I just loved him. That's all I ever did." She hung up. I never heard from her again. Mr. Morrison sent a check once, a large one, no note. I sent it back. I'm 60 years old now. My hair is completely white. My hands still hurt in the mornings, but I wake up in my own house, in my own bed, and I don't have to be invisible anymore. Daniel visits twice a week. Sometimes Rebecca comes too. Sometimes it's just him, and we sit in my kitchen and he eats my cooking and we talk about everything and nothing. He's a father now, a baby girl, 3 months old. They named her Rosa. "We wanted her to know," he explained, "that the most important people in our lives are the ones who choose to love us." I hold that baby and I think about the woman I was at 52, desperate, exhausted, invisible. I think about that first day in the Morrison mansion, being told the best help is the kind you never notice. And I think about Daniel walking off that altar, choosing to see me in front of everyone, choosing to make me visible. Life is strange sometimes. You spend years thinking you don't matter, that you're just going through the motions, surviving, and then someone sees you, really sees you, and everything changes. I didn't go to that mansion expecting to find a son. I went there to clean toilets and cook dinners and send money home. But somewhere between the marble floors and the cold kitchen and the years of invisibility, I found something I didn't know I needed. A family that chose me. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. That's what Daniel taught me. Love isn't about biology or obligation. It's about showing up, seeing someone, choosing them over and over again. I spent 7 years cleaning a mansion, but Daniel spent 7 years seeing me. And in the end, that made all the difference. So I want to know, what do you think? Have you ever been invisible? Have you ever been seen? Tell me your story in the comments. And if this story touched you, if it reminded you that every person matters, that every act of kindness counts, subscribe to this channel. Share this video. Let's remind each other that we're all seen, that we all matter. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me.